कोई भी इंडस्ट्री चलती है ट्रेंड्स पे, जो नहीं चलनी चाहिए, हमको सबको पता है कि ट्रेंड्स पे नहीं चलनी चाहिए, हर चीज़ यूनिक होनी चाहिए, लेकिन हम चलते ट्रेंड्स पे ही है। एक पिक्चर अभी हॉरर कॉमेडी चल रही है, एक के पीछे एक हॉरर कॉमेडीज बनेंगी, तब तक बनेंगी जब तक वो चलना बंद नहीं हो जाएंगे। ट्रेंड सेटिंग वो ट्रेंड पे चलने वाली इंडस्ट्री रहती है। तो जब पैसे आते हैं तो लोग ट्रेंड पे चलते हैं कि यार भाई वो जो चला हुआ है वही मैं करूँगा, जो चला हुआ है वही मैं करूँगा।
Cinema thrives on creativity, but sometimes even this beloved art form can fall prey to repetition. Now, what starts as a unique trend often becomes an overdone trope when filmmakers try to replicate their success without understanding what actually made it work in the first place. Trends have to either evolve or be abandoned altogether when they reach a saturation point, a point where the audiences feel absolutely exhausted and don't wish to be entertained at all in that same manner. Now, 2024 was a very happening year for Indian cinema. You know, a lot of things happened this year. But as the year comes to the close and as we begin 2025, here are a bunch of trends that we hope do not take precedence and they actually take a backseat in 2025. Let us know in the comments what are your thoughts as you watch this video. Now, do you remember when sequels were actually making sense, when they built upon their predecessors instead of just feeling like hastily stitched cash grabs? Have a look at this graphic of some of the sequels currently in the works. Don't you think 80% of them make no sense at all? Today, the trend of universe building and sequels has spiraled into absurdity. Take, for example, the recent trend of retrofitting older films into shared universes. The so-called Rohit Shetty Cop universe is the ultimate example of this. While Singham and its initial sequel felt somewhat cohesive, the later entries like Simba and Suryavanshi turned into chaotic spectacles that prioritized franchise building over narrative integrity. Characters are shoehorned into each other's stories, often at the cost of coherence, and the films feel more like extended ads for the universe rather than standalone stories. Singham again took it to the heights of absurdity, with anyone and everyone coming into it. The obsession of turning every hit film into a franchise has diluted the joy of watching standalone stories. Do we really need a prequel of every beloved character, or a universe where every second film teases that a third film is coming and a fourth film might also be there with the ending of the third film? Franchises work best basically when they are originally developed. Take Drishyam 2 for example, which worked very well because of how it was a natural continuation of the original story. Compare this with 4 sequels like Bhool Bhulaiya 2 and 3, which are basically attempts to stretch a single hit concept into a franchise without proper groundwork. When a sequel feels unnecessary or disjointed, it is time to question whether it was worth making or not. We really hope that the film industry finally learns that every story doesn't have to be part of an IP, intellectual property. Sometimes the narratives can shine brighter when they are left as one-offs, individual alone films. Now, I'm guessing that this is not going to happen anytime soon, considering that at least half a dozen movies are already currently developing under universes, and Ajay Devgan is, maybe working on a dozen more sequels himself. Now, the second one is horror comedy and bloodthirsty action figures. Horror comedies were actually a breath of fresh air back in 2018. But fast forward to today and every third film wants to mix laughs with jump scares. By 2024, the subgenre began to feel like stale popcorn, oversalted and overdone. Films like Phone Bhoot and Chandramukhi 2 relied on rehashing the same old tropes. Ghosts that crack jokes, humans that bumble their way through supernatural chaos, and endings that try too hard to be clever. What was once refreshing now feels like a lazy formula. Similarly, we have blood-soaked action flicks, which definitely have turned into their own subgenre, but most of the times, yes, they do have gratuitous levels of violence, but most of the times they overshadow the impact and the power of real storytelling. Films like Animal and Jawan succeeded because they use action to serve a cohesive spectacle. On the other hand, many lesser films like Yudra, Crack, Double I Smart resort to slow-motion gore and earth-shattering music as a substitute for substance. It is as if the filmmakers believe that louder and bloodier equals are better. And the spoiler is that it does not. You see, audiences are also starting to get tired from this relentless barrage of horror comedies and ultra-violent spectacles. It is time for creators to get more innovative within these genres, let these genres of horror comedy and action spectacles rest for a while, and why not explore genres like psychological horror or grounded action dramas like the movie Kill. Not every film is Bahubali. That film earned its two-parter because of how it offered a story that was so expansive and rich in detail that it justified the wait for the second chapter. Unfortunately, many filmmakers seem to have misinterpreted this success, believing that splitting any film into two parts automatically creates hype and commercializes it again. Now, take Devara for instance. Marketed as a pan-India epic, the film sparked intrigue but left audiences questioning whether its ambitious scale could truly justify splitting it into multiple parts. It's a prime example of how the pan-India label and cliffhanger formula can backfire when the content does not feel substantial enough to sustain even one part, let alone two. A two-part story only works when each installment stands on its own merits. KGF Chapter 1 managed to captivate audiences by building a compelling world and characters, creating genuine anticipation for the sequel. By contrast, when a first part feels incomplete or unsatisfying, essentially an expensive trailer for the next, audiences grow weary. Similarly, by just slapping the pan-India label on films has become like a hollow marketing gimmick. Just because a film has been dubbed in multiple languages, it doesn't mean that it becomes pan-Indian. Audiences can see through these superficial attempts at inclusivity when the story lacks substance or cultural authenticity altogether. Instead of stretching narratives unnecessarily or chasing that pan-India status for its own sake, filmmakers should actually focus on crafting stories that are complete and impactful. If a story truly deserves to span for two parts or maybe three parts or reach across, linguistic boundaries, the quality of the film will make it very clear for the audiences. Otherwise, we are just left with films that feel more or less like fragmented cash grabs rather than just, being cohesive cinematic experiences that are actually worth watching and actually worth waiting for. The joy of revisiting classics like Tumbad, Jab We Met and Kal Ho Na Ho on the big screen is undeniable. There is something magical about watching an iconic film with an audience, sharing collective gasps, laughter and applause. However, by the end of this year, which is 2024, the trend of re-releasing older movies has spiraled out of control. What was once a very celebratory event has now become an almost weekly affair which robs the experiences of their specialness. Re-releasing films should only be reserved for genuine nostalgia, anniversaries, retrospectives, or curated events that actually honor the art of cinema. For instance, screenings of Sholay to celebrate its 50th anniversary felt monumental because that is a milestone worth celebrating. Similarly, we have 100 years of Raj Kapoor and we had a lot of films of his screening at multiplexes for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. A lot of people showed up, a lot of people enjoyed those experiences because it truly felt special. It had a lot of meaning and substance. But then why do you have to re-release films like BV number 1, which feels like, again, a lazy cash grab, and let's be honest, no one was asking for it. Moreover, inundating the market with classical re-releases diminishes the available space for newer contemporary films, particularly those which are from smaller independent creators who are, already struggling to get their films in the theaters. And since theaters can only show a limited number of titles at any given point of time, bringing back a beloved classic without a clear purpose often displaces up-and-coming voices that actually deserve a chance to be heard on the big screen. Now, South Indian cinema has been doing a lot when it actually comes to redefining cinematic storytelling and scale. However, its release strategies in the North Indian circuits have not been very good. They are frustratingly inadequate. Films like Kishkindha Kandam and Vettayan, both great successes in their home markets, faced significant hurdles when it came to distribution in multiplexes across the North. Limited screenings and poorly planned releases already meant that audiences outside the South India either had to settle for a subpar dubbed version or wait for these films to appear on streaming platforms, losing out on the grandeur of that big screen ginormous experience. The problem largely stems from distribution channels and streaming deals where films are actually prioritized on OTT platforms over theatrical releases in regions where they could actually attract a newer audience. Adding to this issue, we have a lot of theaters in North India that have failed to screen these films in their original languages, which actually rob the viewers from the authenticity and and the cultural richness that these works are bringing. Watching a dubbed version often dilutes the emotional impact and the performances and just compromises the overall cinematic experience. I mean, you cannot expect the dubbing to be absolutely perfect every single time. This trend not only limits access to some of the finest Indian cinema but also perpetuates a cultural divide. North Indian audiences deserve the chance to experience South Indian films as they were intended, complete with their original language, music and cinematic nuances. To bridge the gap, distributors and exhibitors must prioritize well-planned releases that respect linguistic diversity. Now, what began as a welcome alternative to traditional cinema viewing medium, which is an environment where independent creators could flourish and audiences can discover some bold, diverse, interesting storytelling, it has sadly devolved into something that is far less inspiring now. Today, many OTT platforms have become little more than dumping grounds for substandard films and shows that fail to secure theatrical releases, overshadowing the very gems, those hidden gems that have actually justified their existence. In earlier years, the multiplex boom struck a remarkable balance. Films like A Wednesday and most of the work by Ayushmann Khurrana reached audiences on the big screen first, enjoying the communal magic of cinema halls before transitioning to smaller platforms. This ensured that quality projects were both properly celebrated and widely accessible. Now, in the quiet spells between big-budget tentpoles, we have lost that equilibrium. Mid-budget films bypass theaters entirely, heading straight to OTT. They don't get that big screen space and they sacrifice the opportunity for a shared cultural experience that the big screen will provide. Consider Amar Singh Chamkila this year. This culturally rich narrative deserved a grand theatrical debut, a setting where collective gasps and cheer would elevate the experience. Instead, it was just on Netflix, achieving viewership stats rather than leaving a memorable cultural imprint. Meanwhile, the influx of content continues to be unabated. The platforms are inundated with formulaic thrillers and uninspired gangster dramas, making it nearly impossible to recall many standout Indian shows this year. In this crowded, cluttered environment, genuine quality struggles to find an audience or even a decent promotional push amidst a deluge of forgettable films that just keep on coming on the platforms. So today is 18th December when I'm recording this video, and today Shuchi Talati's Girls Will Be Girls has released on Prime, finally, for the Indian audiences, but not in the setting that it deserved. It had to be a theatrical rollout, but then it arrived quietly under the radar on a streaming platform, which is yet another casualty of a system that rarely grants worthy stories the grand stage that they deserve. By the way, you should definitely watch that film. It is out on Prime Video, and yeah, do not miss out the chance of watching gems like this, and I hope that these films do get the theatrical releases that they deserve. Alright, it's 2024, yet some of the VFX films in India still look like they belong in the early 2000s. The most glaring example of this was Adipurush, where CGI-heavy visuals were not only looked fake, but also detracted from emotional weight of the story. From poorly animated creatures to unnaturally glowing settings, the overuse of green screens became a running joke among audiences, even turning into memes online. This reliance on subpar VFX is not just a technical issue, it's a storytelling failure, as viewers are pulled out of the immersive experience that a good film should provide. But with big fantasy films, you still get a sense of why VFX reliance is actually needed. However, even for very basic things, the dependence on VFX becomes bothersome. There are films like Bade Miyan Chote Miyan and Ganpat, for example, which have become a joke because of the shoddy VFX that is present in those films. Audiences today are highly discerning and they have become accustomed to polished visuals that come from international productions. So when a film relies too heavily on green screen without the necessary finesse, it undermines the realism and impact of the narrative. Compare this with Indian films like RRR or PS1, which skillfully combined VFX with on-location shoots and real sets to deliver visually stunning sequels and sequences that felt authentic and engaging. When I say sequels, I don't mean RRR will get a sequel, but yeah, you know what I mean. Real landscapes bring an irreplaceable depth and authenticity to storytelling. They ground the narrative in a tangible reality that CGI often fails to replicate. Whether it is the beautiful valleys of Kashmir in Haider or the lush backwaters of Kerala in Dil Se, location shooting adds a sense of place and atmosphere that cannot be artificially recreated. Well, now the solution is not that we abandon VFX altogether. That is definitely not the case, but we have to use VFX judiciously. Instead of creating entire worlds digitally, filmmakers should actually blend practical effects, which is real locations, and computer generated graphics to create a cohesive visual experience. This is possible, this has been done before and should be done. Audiences are no longer impressed by a grandiose CGI for the sake of scale. They actually crave believability and artistry. Let's bring back the beauty of on-location shooting combined with CGI and VFX that are being done on special stages and only for specific scenes. It should not be that the entire movie has been done on a green screen. Alright, finally let's talk about money. When Indian male actors demand a lot of fees, exorbitant amount of fees, it leaves little room for the budget of quality production or fair pay to everyone else working in the film. The industry needs to rethink the model, especially when only a handful of stars guarantee box office successes. Lower fees can actually help in better funding and better remuneration for each and everyone who work in the crew, the sets, the VFX, the storytelling, even the spot boy for that matter. Everyone gets a fair share of their hard work and labor, and this is something that audiences have actually started caring about. Now, ultimately, it's not that these trends are inherently bad. Many of them are actually born out of creativity and ambition, but when they are overused or misapplied, they stop being tools of storytelling and they start becoming barriers to it. In 2025, let's try to shift our focus back to the craft of telling compelling stories that actually resonate deeply with the audiences rather than churning out films that feel like soulless assembly line products that have been pushed on OTTs or screens, mostly on OTTs, but yeah, you get my point. Alright, so if you are still staying till the end of the video, I am very thankful for all your love and support. 2024 again has been a great year for Long Live Cinema, especially in terms of podcasts. We got great opportunities to interact with so many people who are the practitioners of the art form of cinema, and we hope that we continue to bring many more such experiences to you. Thank you so much for staying subscribed, and do share this video. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We will be back next year with many more such video essays and podcasts. Stay tuned, and as always, long live cinema.